I was a single mom working 3 jobs when I stopped to help an elderly woman carry her groceries. The next day, she walked into my job interview. Then she smiled and said, "Hello again, Sarah." I felt my heart stop as I realized the frail woman I'd spent 45 minutes helping yesterday, making me miss my daughter's school play rehearsal, was actually Margaret Chen, the billionaire founder of Chen Technologies, and the person who would decide if I got the marketing director position that could finally pull us out of poverty. I had no idea that the woman struggling with her bags in the parking lot was testing me, or that my choice to help her despite being exhausted and desperately needed at home would determine not just my career, but my entire future. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I always love seeing our global community come together. If you enjoy stories about second chances, single mothers fighting for their families, and how one act of kindness can change everything, make sure to hit that like button right now and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these inspiring true stories. Now, let me take you back to 3 months ago, when I was just another exhausted single mom with a 6-year-old daughter, crushing debt, and a job interview I couldn't afford to mess up. My alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning, the same time it had gone off every morning for the past 2 years. I reached across the cramped twin bed I shared with my daughter Emma and silenced it before it could wake her. In the dim light filtering through our apartment's single window, I could see her small face peaceful in sleep, her dark curls spread across the pillow we shared. She was 6 years old and had never had her own bed, never had her own room, never had the childhood I'd dreamed of giving her before her father walked out when she was 2 months old, leaving me with nothing but debt and a colicky baby. I slipped out of bed carefully, my body aching from yesterday's shifts. 3 jobs meant 3 different uniforms, 3 different personas, 3 different versions of myself that I cycled through like costumes in a play where I was always performing survival. Morning shift at the diner from 5 to 11, afternoon shift doing data entry remotely from 11:30 to 3, evening shift cleaning offices from 4 to 10. 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and still we were barely making it. Our studio apartment in the worst part of town cost $1,200 a month. Emma's childcare while I worked cost another $800. Food, utilities, my ancient car that broke down twice a month, the medical bills from when she'd had pneumonia last year that I was still paying off in $25 increments. The math never worked out. Every month I was juggling which bill to pay late, which creditor to avoid, which necessity to sacrifice. But I'd applied for a real job, a career job. Marketing director at Chen Technologies, one of the biggest tech companies in the city. The salary was $75,000 a year, more money than I'd ever imagined making. Enough to get us into a real apartment with a bedroom for Emma. Enough to stop working myself into an early grave. Enough to finally breathe. I'd sent in my application on a whim 6 weeks ago, never expecting to hear back. My resume was a patchwork of survival jobs, and my marketing degree from the community college felt inadequate compared to the candidates they usually hired. But somehow, miraculously, they'd called me in for an interview. Tomorrow. Tuesday at 10 in the morning, right in the middle of my data entry shift. But I'd figure it out. I had to. I pulled on my diner uniform, the pink polyester dress that smelled like grease no matter how many times I washed it, and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. 28 years old, and I looked 40. Dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Hair that I kept in a perpetual ponytail because I didn't have time to style it. Hands rough from cleaning chemicals and dishwater. I barely recognized the girl I'd been in college, the one who'd believed she could build a career in marketing, who'd dreamed of creating campaigns that moved people, who'd thought the world was full of possibility. That girl had died somewhere between the positive pregnancy test and the divorce papers, replaced by this exhausted woman who just wanted to survive another day. Emma stirred as I was leaving, and I went back to kiss her forehead. "Mama has to go to work, baby," I whispered. "Mrs. Rodriguez will be here at 6 to take you to school." Our neighbor, a kind woman in her 70s who charged me almost nothing to watch Emma in the early mornings, was the only reason I could work the diner shift. "I love you more than the whole sky. Love you more than all the stars," Emma mumbled, our ritual, before falling back asleep. She was so good, so patient with our situation, never complaining about our tiny apartment, or the fact that I was always working. Last week, she'd told her teacher that when she grew up, she wanted to be like her mama because I was the strongest person she knew. I'd cried in the bathroom of the diner for 10 minutes after her teacher told me that. The morning shift at the diner was brutal as always. My feet ached within an hour, and the usual crowd of truckers and early morning construction workers kept me running from 4:30 until the breakfast rush ended around 9. I smiled through their sometimes inappropriate comments, pocketed my tips, and tried not to think about how I was going to prepare for tomorrow's interview when I had exactly 0 free time. I'd printed out information about Chen Technologies last week and had been trying to read it during my 10-minute breaks, memorizing facts about their recent campaigns and company values. I'd borrowed a blazer from a woman at the diner who was roughly my size. I'd practiced interview questions while scrubbing toilets during my evening shift. It wasn't enough, but it was all I had. At 11, I clocked out and drove the 15 minutes home, changed out of my diner uniform and into regular clothes, and logged into my laptop for my data entry shift. 4 hours of entering numbers into spreadsheets. Mind-numbing work that paid $12 an hour and required just enough attention that I couldn't do anything else simultaneously. I ate a peanut butter sandwich standing at the kitchen counter and tried not to think about how Emma's school play rehearsal was tonight at 6, right when I'd be starting my cleaning shift. I'd already missed 2 rehearsals. She'd said it was okay, that lots of kids' parents couldn't come, but I'd seen the disappointment in her eyes. By 3 o'clock, I was logging off the data entry job and preparing for my evening shift. The cleaning company I worked for had me scheduled at an office building downtown. 5 hours of vacuuming, emptying trash, and scrubbing bathrooms. I picked Emma up from after-school care, and we had exactly 45 minutes together before I had to drop her off at Mrs. Rodriguez's for the evening. We sat in the car outside a park we couldn't afford the time to actually play in, and she told me about her day while eating the apple slices and crackers I'd packed for her snack. "Mama, my play is tonight," she said, her voice small. "I'm the 3rd sunflower from the left. Mrs. Martinez said I have a very loud voice for projecting." My heart cracked. "Baby, I know. I'm so sorry I can't be there. But I promise I'll be at the real performance on Friday night." I already asked for that evening off from cleaning. It had cost me a shift I desperately needed, but I would not miss her actual performance. The rehearsal, though? I'd already missed it twice, and tonight would be the 3rd time. I was failing her in 1,000 small ways, and we both knew it. "It's okay, Mama," she said, but her voice wobbled. "Mrs. Rodriguez said she might be able to come watch." "I love you so much," I said, pulling her close. "You know that, right? Everything I do, every job I work, it's all for you, to make our life better." "I know," she said, and she hugged me tight. "You're the best mama in the world." I dropped her at Mrs. Rodriguez's at 4:15 and drove to the office building, my chest tight with guilt and exhaustion. This was my life. This endless cycle of work and guilt, of trying and failing, of loving my daughter more than anything while never being able to give her what she needed. The interview tomorrow felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. If I could just get this job, everything would change. We could have a real home. I could have weekends off. I could go to her school plays and parent-teacher conferences. I could be the mother she deserved instead of this exhausted ghost who was always working, always absent, always apologizing. The office building was 23 floors of corporate suites, and I was responsible for floors 15 through 20. I pushed my cleaning cart out of the service elevator and began the familiar routine. Empty the trash cans, vacuum the carpets, wipe down the desks, clean the bathrooms, restock the paper towels and toilet paper. It was methodical work that required no thought, which meant my mind was free to spiral into anxiety about tomorrow's interview. What if I said the wrong thing? What if they could tell I was just a desperate single mom with no real experience? What if my borrowed blazer looked cheap? What if they asked me about the gap in my resume and I had to explain that I'd spent the last 6 years just trying to survive? By 9:30, I was finishing up the last floor, my back aching and my hands raw from cleaning chemicals. I had 30 minutes to get back to Mrs. Rodriguez's to pick up Emma, get her home and into bed, and then maybe, if I was lucky, I'd have an hour to review my interview materials before I collapsed into sleep and started the whole cycle again tomorrow. Except tomorrow wouldn't be the same. Tomorrow I had the interview at 10, which meant I'd have to leave the diner early, which meant less tip money, but it was worth it. It had to be worth it. I was pushing my cart toward the service elevator when I saw her. An elderly woman, probably in her 70s, struggling with 4 large grocery bags in the parking garage. It was almost 10 at night, and she was alone, her arms trembling with the weight of the bags as she tried to walk toward a sleek black car parked near the elevator. Even from a distance, I could see she was in distress, her face pale and her breathing labored. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to keep walking. I was already running late. Emma was waiting. I was exhausted. This wasn't my problem. But I watched as one of the bags slipped from her grip and hit the ground, oranges rolling across the concrete, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't just walk past someone who needed help, no matter how tired I was or how late I was running. My grandmother had raised me after my parents died when I was 12. She'd been a cleaning woman too, and she'd always said that you could tell the measure of a person by what they did when no one was watching, when there was no reward for kindness except the knowledge that you'd helped another human being. She'd died 2 years ago, and I missed her every single day. She would have stopped to help this woman. So I would too. "Excuse me," I called out, pushing my cart to the side and hurrying over. "Can I help you with those bags?" The woman looked up at me, and I saw relief flood her face. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was dressed simply in slacks and a cardigan, but there was something about her bearing that suggested dignity despite her current struggle. "Oh, would you? I'm afraid I bought more than I could carry, and I'm not as strong as I used to be." "Of course," I said, bending to gather the oranges that had rolled away. "Let me get these bags for you. Where's your car?" "Just there," she said, pointing to the black sedan. "The trunk is open. I was trying to make it in one trip, but I think my ambition exceeded my capability." I smiled despite my exhaustion. I know that feeling. I gathered all 4 bags, heavy with what felt like cans and bottles, and carried them to her car. My arms burned with the weight, but I loaded them carefully into her trunk, making sure nothing would shift or fall during her drive. The oranges went into a small box she had back there, and I arranged everything so it was secure. "Thank you so much," she said, and her voice was warm with genuine gratitude. "You've been so kind. Can I give you something for your trouble?" "No, thank you," I said automatically. "I'm just glad I could help." I glanced at my watch and felt my stomach drop. 9:45. I was definitely going to be late picking up Emma now. Mrs. Rodriguez would understand, but Emma would be the last kid there again, waiting for her always late mother. "Are you sure?" the woman asked. "You look like you've had a long day." I laughed, a tired sound. "You could say that, but honestly, it's fine. I hope you have a good night." I started to turn away, but she reached out and gently touched my arm. "What's your name, dear?" "Sarah," I said. "Sarah Mitchell." "Sarah," she repeated, as if committing it to memory. "Thank you, Sarah. Your kindness means more than you know." There was something in her eyes, a sharpness that seemed at odds with her frail appearance, but I was too tired and too late to think much about it. "You're welcome," I said, and then I was hurrying back to my cleaning cart, pushing it toward the service elevator, mentally calculating how late I'd be. 15 minutes, probably. Mrs. Rodriguez would wait, but I'd feel guilty about it for days. This was my life, I thought as the elevator descended. Always running late, always juggling, always choosing between impossible options. Help a stranger, or be on time for your daughter. Work extra hours, or go to the school play. Pay the electric bill, or buy groceries that weren't just rice and beans. I picked up Emma at 10:15, apologizing profusely to Mrs. Rodriguez, who waved me off with her usual kindness. Emma was half asleep already, and I carried her to the car and buckled her in. She woke up enough to ask, "Did you have a good day at work, Mama?" "I did, baby," I said, even though my feet were screaming and my back ached and I wanted to cry from exhaustion. "I helped someone tonight, an old lady who needed help with her groceries." "That's good, Mama," Emma said sleepily. "Grandma Grace always said helping people was important." "She did," I agreed, my throat tight. My grandmother would have been proud of me for stopping to help, even if it made me late. "Character is who you are when no one's watching," she used to say. Well, I'd been late and exhausted and desperate to get home, and I'd stopped anyway. That had to count for something. We got home at 10:30, and I carried Emma inside and helped her change into her pajamas. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow, and I stood there for a moment, looking at her peaceful face. Everything I did was for her. Every exhausting shift, every missed school event, every moment of bone-deep tiredness. I was trying to build us a better life, and tomorrow's interview was my chance to finally make that happen. I spent the next hour reviewing my notes about Chen Technologies, practicing my answers to common interview questions, and steaming my borrowed blazer in the bathroom while the shower ran hot. By midnight, I was falling into bed beside Emma, setting my alarm for 4:30, and praying that tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The next morning followed the same brutal routine. Up at 4:30, careful not to wake Emma, into my diner uniform, out the door by 4:45. The morning shift was busy, and I was running on pure adrenaline and caffeine. At 9:30, I told my manager I needed to leave early for a doctor's appointment, losing 2 hours of wages and tips, and drove home to change into my interview clothes. The borrowed blazer, a white blouse I'd bought at a thrift store, black slacks that were slightly too short, and my only pair of heels, which I hadn't worn in 2 years and which immediately started giving me blisters. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and tried to see what the interviewers would see. A desperate woman trying to look professional. A single mom with no real experience trying to convince them she could do the job. I'd pulled my hair back into a neat bun, applied more makeup than I usually wore to try to hide the exhaustion in my face, and practiced my smile until it looked almost natural. This was it. My one chance. I couldn't mess this up. The drive to Chen Technologies took 25 minutes, and I spent the entire time running through my prepared answers. Why do you want this job? Because I need it desperately, because my daughter deserves better than a studio apartment and a mother who's never home. Because I'm drowning, and this is my lifeline. But I couldn't say that. I had to say something about being passionate about marketing, about admiring their company's innovative campaigns, about wanting to contribute my skills to their mission. All true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that I was terrified and desperate, and this job represented everything I'd been fighting for since Emma was born. Chen Technologies was housed in a gleaming glass building downtown, the kind of place I'd never imagined working. I parked in the visitor lot and walked toward the entrance, my heels clicking on the pavement, my portfolio clutched in my sweating hands. The lobby was all marble and chrome, impossibly clean and modern, and I felt like an imposter the moment I walked through the doors. Everyone here looked so polished, So professional, so unlike me in my thrift store clothes and borrowed blazer. I checked in with the receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a crisp suit who looked at me with barely concealed assessment. "Sarah Mitchell for a 10 o'clock interview with the marketing department," I said, and my voice only shook a little. "Have a seat," she said, gesturing to a waiting area with leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Someone will be with you shortly." I sat down and tried to calm my racing heart. This was fine. I was prepared. I'd researched the company, practiced my answers, and brought a portfolio of marketing materials I'd created in college and a few freelance projects I'd done over the years. I could do this. I had to do this. At exactly 10 o'clock, a woman in her 40s appeared, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying a tablet. "Sarah Mitchell?" she said, and I stood up too quickly, nearly dropping my portfolio. "Yes, that's me," I said, shaking her hand with what I hoped was confidence. "I'm Jennifer Wu, Director of Human Resources," she said. "Follow me, please. We'll be conducting the interview in the executive conference room on the top floor." The top floor? That seemed unusual for a mid-level marketing position, but I didn't question it. I followed her to the elevator, my heels still giving me blisters, and tried to make small talk about the weather in the building. Jennifer was polite but distant, and I couldn't read whether that was normal or whether she'd already decided I wasn't right for the position. The elevator opened onto the top floor, which was even more impressive than the lobby. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the conference room Jennifer led me to was enormous, with a long table that could seat 20 people. At the head of the table sat 3 people: a man in his 50s in an expensive suit, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a tablet, and at the very end, in a chair that seemed almost throne-like, was the elderly woman from last night. I stopped walking. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The frail woman I'd helped with her groceries, who'd struggled to carry 4 bags, who'd thanked me so warmly for my kindness, was sitting at the head of the table in Chen Technologies' executive conference room, looking at me with those same kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was dressed differently now, in an elegant suit that screamed power and money, her silver hair still in that neat bun, and she was smiling at me with something that looked like satisfaction. "Hello again, Sarah," she said, and her voice was the same warm tone from last night, but there was something else in it now. Authority. Command. This was not a frail old woman who needed help with groceries. This was someone who wielded enormous power, and I had absolutely no idea what was happening. Jennifer gestured to a chair across from the panel. "Please, sit down, Ms. Mitchell." I sat, my mind reeling, my hands trembling as I placed my portfolio on the table. The elderly woman was still smiling at me, and the other 2 panel members were watching me with expressions I couldn't read. Was this a test? Had last night been some kind of setup? But how could they have known I'd be there? I cleaned that building every week, but they couldn't have predicted I'd stop to help someone in the parking garage. The man in the expensive suit spoke first. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming in today. I'm Robert Chen, Chief Operating Officer of Chen Technologies." He gestured to the woman with the tablet. "This is Diana Park, our Chief Marketing Officer, and I believe you've already met our founder and CEO, Margaret Chen." Margaret Chen, the billionaire founder of Chen Technologies. The woman whose company had revolutionized cloud computing and data security. The woman whose face I'd seen in business magazines and news articles, though I'd never paid close attention because people like her existed in a world so far removed from mine that they might as well have been fictional. And I'd helped her carry her groceries last night. I'd seen her struggling and stopped to help, not knowing who she was, not expecting anything in return. I started, but my voice came out as a croak. I cleared my throat and tried again. "I'm sorry, I'm just surprised. I didn't realize that the woman you helped last night was me?" Margaret Chen finished, and her smile widened. No, I imagine you didn't. That was rather the point. Robert Chen leaned forward, his expression serious. Ms. Mitchell, we should explain. Mrs. Chen has a rather unorthodox method of evaluating potential employees for key positions. She believes that a person's true character is revealed not in an interview setting, where everyone is performing their best self, but in unguarded moments when they think no one important is watching. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they must be able to hear it. Last night was a test? Not exactly, Margaret Chen said, and her voice was gentle. I do this regularly, Sarah. I go to various locations around the city, places where our employees work or might work, and I observe. Sometimes I'm in the parking garage of this building. Sometimes I'm at the coffee shop across the street. Sometimes I'm at the grocery store or the park. I present myself as someone in need of help, someone vulnerable, and I see how people respond. Diana Park spoke up, her voice crisp and professional. Most people don't stop. They're too busy, too focused on their own concerns, or they simply don't notice. Of the people who do stop, many are performative about it, looking around to see if anyone's watching, or they help in a way that's minimal and grudging. Very few people stop and help with genuine kindness, with no expectation of reward or recognition. You stopped, Margaret Chen said, and her eyes were warm as she looked at me. You were clearly exhausted. You kept checking your watch, and I could see you were worried about being late for something. You were in your work uniform, and you looked like you'd already put in a full day. But you stopped anyway. You didn't just grab the bags closest to me and dump them in my trunk. You gathered every single orange that had rolled away. You arranged everything carefully so nothing would shift during the drive. You spoke to me with respect and kindness, not pity or condescension. And when I offered to pay you for your trouble, you refused. I was just helping someone who needed help, I said, and my voice was barely above a whisper. My grandmother always taught me that you help people when you can, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Margaret Chen said. Tell me about her. And so I did. Sitting in that conference room with three of the most powerful people in the company, I told them about my grandmother Grace, who had raised me after my parents died, who had worked as a cleaning woman her entire life but had taught me that dignity had nothing to do with your job title and everything to do with how you treated people. I told them about how she'd always stopped to help people, how she'd given her last dollar to someone who needed it more, how she'd taught me that character was who you were when no one was watching. I told them that she'd died 2 years ago, and that I tried every day to live up to the values she'd instilled in me. When I finished, there were tears in Margaret Chen's eyes. My mother was a cleaning woman too, she said quietly. She came to this country with nothing, and she worked her fingers to the bone to give me opportunities she never had. She taught me the same lessons your grandmother taught you. That's why I built this company, Sarah. Not just to make money or create technology, but to create a place where people are valued for their character and their contributions, not just their credentials or connections. Robert Chen pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to me. Ms. Mitchell, we've reviewed your application materials. Your resume is unconventional, but your portfolio shows real talent and creativity. Your references from your current employers all describe you as hardworking, reliable, and kind. And after last night, Mrs. Chen specifically requested that you be moved to the top of our candidate list for the marketing director position. I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a job offer letter, and the salary listed was $85,000 a year, $10,000 more than the position had advertised. There were benefits listed: health insurance, dental, vision, retirement matching, and something called family support services that included childcare assistance and flexible scheduling. I don't understand, I said, looking up at them. You're offering me the job, Just like that? Don't you want to interview me first? Ask me about my qualifications or my experience? Diana Park smiled, the first warm expression I'd seen from her. Mrs. Chen's test is the interview, Sarah. We can teach you marketing strategies and company protocols. We can't teach character, integrity, or compassion. You have those qualities in abundance. Everything else, we can work with. But I'm just a single mom with a community college degree, I said, and I hated how my voice broke. I've been working survival jobs for 6 years. I clean offices and wait tables and do data entry. I'm not qualified for this. You're more qualified than you think, Margaret Chen said firmly. You understand hard work. You understand sacrifice. You understand what it means to care about people beyond what they can do for you. Those are the qualities I want in my leadership team. The technical skills, the marketing knowledge, the corporate experience. Those things can be learned. But character? That's something you either have or you don't. And you have it, Sarah. I looked down at the offer letter again. At the salary that would change everything for Emma and me. At the benefits that would mean I could actually take her to the doctor when she was sick without worrying about the bill. At the words, flexible scheduling, that would mean I could go to her school plays and parent-teacher conferences. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. There's one more thing, Robert Chen said, pulling out another document. Mrs. Chen was so impressed by your actions last night that she's authorized a signing bonus of $25,000 to be paid upon your acceptance of the position. She thought you might have some debts or expenses that this could help with. $25,000. I could pay off Emma's medical bills. I could move us into a real apartment with a bedroom for her. I could buy her a bed of her own, toys, clothes that weren't from thrift stores. I could stop working 3 jobs and actually be present in my daughter's life. I could breathe for the first time in 6 years. The tears came then, and I couldn't stop them. I sat in that conference room with these powerful people and cried like a child, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from drowning to breathing, from desperation to hope. Margaret Chen came around the table and put her hand on my shoulder. This woman who could have been my grandmother, who had tested me without my knowledge and found me worthy. It's okay, dear, she said softly. Take your time. This is a lot to process. I managed between sobs. I just stopped to help someone. That's all I did. I was late picking up my daughter, and I felt guilty about it all night. But I couldn't just walk past you. And now you're offering me everything I've been fighting for, everything I've been working for, and I don't know how to accept that this is real. It's real, Diana Park said, and her voice was kind. And you deserve it, Sarah. Not because you helped Mrs. Chen, but because you're the kind of person who would help anyone who needed it, whether they were a billionaire or a homeless person on the street. That's who we want here. That's who Mrs. Chen built this company to support and elevate. I wiped my eyes and looked at the offer letter again, at the job title that would change my life, at the salary that would save us. Can I ask one question? Of course, Margaret Chen said. The flexible scheduling, I said, pointing to the benefits section. Does that mean I could leave at 3 to pick up my daughter from school and be there for her school events? It means exactly that, Robert Chen said. We believe that parents should be able to be parents. We have on-site childcare if you need it, and we encourage our employees to prioritize their families. Work is important, but it's not everything. I thought about Emma, about how she'd said it was okay that I missed her rehearsals, about how she'd never complained about our tiny apartment, or the fact that I was always working. I thought about how I could finally be the mother she deserved, how I could finally give her the childhood I dreamed of providing. I thought about my grandmother, who had sacrificed everything for me, who had taught me that helping others mattered more than personal convenience. And I thought about the woman sitting beside me, who had built a $1 billion company but still went out into the world disguised as someone vulnerable, testing people's character in parking garages and grocery stores. "I accept," I said, and my voice was steady now. "I accept the position, and I promise you won't regret this. I'll work harder than anyone. I'll prove that your faith in me wasn't misplaced." "I know you will," Margaret Chen said, and she smiled. "Welcome to Chen Technologies, Sarah. I have a feeling you're going to do remarkable things here." The next hour was a blur of paperwork and explanations. Jennifer Wu took me through the employment documents, the benefits enrollment, the background check authorization. Diana Park walked me through what my first few weeks would look like, the training I'd receive, the team I'd be working with. Robert Chen explained the company culture, the expectations, the opportunities for advancement. And through it all, Margaret Chen sat quietly, watching me with those kind, intelligent eyes, occasionally adding a comment or clarification. When we were finally done, when I'd signed everything and been given a start date 2 weeks away, Margaret Chen asked to speak with me privately. The others left the conference room, and it was just the two of us, this billionaire and the single mom she'd found in a parking garage. "I want to tell you something, Sarah," she said, and her voice was soft. "I started this company 40 years ago with nothing but an idea and determination. I was a single mother too, working multiple jobs, trying to give my son opportunities I never had. I know what it's like to be exhausted and desperate, to feel like you're failing your child even though you're doing everything you can. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be dismissed because of your circumstances, rather than valued for your character. You built all of this from that?" I asked, gesturing to the building around us. "I did," she said, "and I never forgot where I came from. That's why I do these tests, Sarah. Because I want to build a company full of people who see other human beings, who stop to help even when it's inconvenient, who have the character and compassion that our world desperately needs. You reminded me last night of why I started this company in the first place. You reminded me of my mother, of myself 40 years ago. And I wanted to give you the chance that someone once gave me." "Who gave you that chance?" I asked. "A woman named Eleanor Grant," Margaret Chen said. "I was working as a cleaning woman in her office building, and she saw me teaching myself to code from library books during my breaks. She paid for me to go back to school, gave me my first job in tech, and mentored me until I was ready to start my own company. She believed in me when no one else did, and she taught me that the greatest thing you can do with success is to help others achieve it too. She died 10 years ago, but I think about her every day. And when I saw you last night, stopping to help me without hesitation, I thought about how Eleanor would have loved you." "I'll make you proud," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I'll make Eleanor proud too. Even though I never met her, I'll work harder than I've ever worked, and I'll help build the kind of company you've envisioned." "I know you will," Margaret Chen said. "But Sarah, I also want you to promise me something else. Promise me that you'll be there for your daughter. That you'll go to her school plays and parent-teacher conferences. That you'll have dinner with her and help her with her homework and be present in her life. Because all the success in the world doesn't mean anything if you lose the people you love in the pursuit of it." "I promise," I said, and tears were streaming down my face again. "I promise I'll be the mother she deserves. That's all I've ever wanted." Margaret Chen hugged me then, this powerful woman who had tested me and found me worthy, who had seen past my circumstances to the person I was underneath. "Go home to your daughter," she said. "Tell her that everything is going to be okay now, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, ready to change the world." I left Chen Technologies in a daze, clutching the folder with my offer letter and signing bonus paperwork, unable to quite believe that my life had just changed so completely. I drove home and picked Emma up from school early, something I'd never been able to do before, and when she climbed into the car, her face lit up with surprise and joy. "Mama, what are you doing here? Did you get fired?" I laughed, and it felt like the first real laugh I'd had in years. No, baby. The opposite. Mama got a new job. A really, really good job. And everything is going to be different now. Different how? She asked. And I could see hope and caution warring in her expression, like she was afraid to believe things could actually get better. Different like we're going to move to a bigger apartment where you'll have your own bedroom, I said. Different like Mama will only have one job instead of 3, and I'll be home for dinner every night. Different like I'll be able to come to all your school plays and parent-teacher conferences. Different like we're going to be okay, Emma. We're finally going to be okay. She stared at me for a moment, and then she burst into tears, throwing her arms around me as much as her seatbelt would allow. Really, Mama? Really, truly? Really, truly, I said, holding her as tight as I could. Remember the lady I helped with her groceries last night? The one I told you about? The old lady? Yes, well, it turns out she's the owner of a really big company, and she was testing me to see if I was a good person. And because I stopped to help her, even though it made me late, she gave me a job. A wonderful job that's going to change our lives. Emma pulled back and looked at me with wonder in her eyes. Grandma Grace always said helping people was important. She did, I agreed. And she was right. She was right about everything. That night, after I'd fed Emma and put her to bed in our cramped studio apartment for what would be one of the last times, I sat at our tiny kitchen table and called my former employers to give my notice. The diner manager was disappointed, but understanding. The data entry company barely cared. The cleaning service was annoyed but professional. And with each call, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The crushing pressure of survival easing just slightly. I spent the next 2 weeks in a whirlwind of activity. I gave my notice at all 3 jobs and worked my final shifts, pocketing every last dollar in tips and wages. I used part of the signing bonus to pay off Emma's medical bills in full, and the relief of seeing those balances go to zero made me cry. I found us a 2-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood, with a park nearby and good schools, and I signed the lease with hands that shook with joy. I bought Emma her first real bed, a twin with a purple comforter she'd been eyeing in a store window for months, and I bought myself a bed too, so we wouldn't have to share anymore. On my last day at the cleaning company, I found myself back in that parking garage where I'd met Margaret Chen. I stood in the spot where I'd seen her struggling with her grocery bags, and I thought about how one choice, one moment of choosing compassion over convenience, had changed everything. If I'd walked past her that night, if I'd decided I was too tired or too late or too focused on my own problems, I would still be drowning. Emma would still be sleeping in a twin bed with me in a studio apartment. I would still be working 3 jobs and missing her school events and feeling like I was failing as a mother. But I had stopped. I had helped. And everything had changed. My first day at Chen Technologies was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Diana Park met me in the lobby and took me up to the marketing department, where I had my own office with a window overlooking the city. My own office. With a door and a desk and a computer and business cards that said, Sarah Mitchell, Marketing Director. I kept touching the business cards, unable to believe they were real. Diana introduced me to my team, 6 talented people who would be reporting to me, and I felt like an imposter. What did I know about managing people? What did I know about corporate marketing? But Diana seemed to sense my anxiety, and she pulled me aside after the introductions. You're going to feel overwhelmed for a while, she said. That's normal. But remember, Mrs. Chen didn't hire you for what you know right now. She hired you for who you are and who you can become. We're going to train you, support you, and help you grow into this role. All you have to do is be yourself, work hard, and treat people with the same kindness and respect you showed Mrs. Chen in that parking garage. And that's what I did. I threw myself into learning everything I could about marketing strategy, campaign development, data analytics, and team management. I asked questions constantly, took notes obsessively, and stayed late studying materials and reviewing successful campaigns. But I also made sure to leave at 3 o'clock every day to pick Emma up from school. I went to her school play, sitting in the front row and cheering so loudly that she laughed with embarrassment and joy. I helped her with her homework at our new kitchen table in our new apartment. I tucked her into her own bed in her own room every night and marveled at how far we'd come. 3 months into my new job, Diana called me into her office for my first performance review. I was nervous, certain that they'd realized they'd made a mistake, that I wasn't cut out for this after all. But Diana smiled as I sat down, and she slid a document across her desk. "Sarah, I want you to know that you've exceeded every expectation we had," she said. "Your campaign for the new cloud security product was brilliant. Your team loves working with you. And most importantly, you've brought something to this department that we were missing: heart. You see our customers as real people with real needs, not just demographics and data points. That's invaluable." "Thank you," I said, and I felt tears pricking at my eyes again. I seem to cry a lot these days, but they were happy tears, grateful tears, tears of relief and joy. "There's more," Diana said. "Mrs. Chen has been watching your progress, and she's impressed. She wants to create a new position, Vice President of Customer Experience, and she wants you to consider it. It would mean a significant raise, more responsibility, and the opportunity to shape how this company interacts with every single customer we serve." I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. "But I've only been here 3 months. And in those 3 months, you've proven that Mrs. Chen's instinct about you was correct," Diana said. "You're not just good at this job, Sarah. You're exceptional, and you're exactly the kind of leader this company needs." I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, exhausted and desperate, working 3 jobs and barely surviving. I thought about the moment I'd stopped to help an elderly woman in a parking garage, never imagining that simple act of kindness would lead to this. And I thought about my grandmother, who had taught me that character mattered more than credentials, that helping others was never a waste of time, that who you are when no one's watching is who you really are. "I'd be honored," I said, "and I promise I'll make you proud. I'll make Mrs. Chen proud. I'll make my grandmother proud." "You already have," Diana said. That evening, I picked Emma up from school and took her to the park near our apartment, the one we'd never had time to play in before. We sat on the swings, and I told her about the promotion, about how Mama was going to be a vice president now, about how we were going to be more than okay. We were going to thrive. "Mama," Emma said, pumping her legs to swing higher, "do you think Grandma Grace knows about everything that happened?" "I think she does, baby," I said. "I think she's proud of us, and I think she's the one who taught me to stop and help that lady, which is why all of this happened." "I'm glad you stopped," Emma said, "even though it made you late to pick me up that night." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." 6 months after that day in the parking garage, Margaret Chen called me to her office. I'd seen her around the building occasionally, and she always stopped to ask about Emma and how I was adjusting to my new role. But this was the first time she'd summoned me to her private office, and I was nervous as I took the elevator to the top floor. Her office was exactly what I would have expected. Elegant but not ostentatious, with photos of her family and awards for her philanthropic work. She gestured for me to sit, and she poured us both tea from a pot on her desk. "Sarah, I wanted to talk to you about something," she said. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened in that parking garage, about how one moment of kindness changed both of our lives." "Changed your life?" I asked, confused. "You were already successful. You didn't need anything from me." "That's where you're wrong," she said gently. I was starting to lose faith, Sarah. I'd been doing my tests for years, and I kept finding people who disappointed me. People who walked past. People who helped grudgingly. People who saw a vulnerable old woman and saw an inconvenience rather than a human being. I was starting to think that the values my mother taught me, the values Eleanor Grant embodied, were dying out in our modern world. That kindness and compassion were becoming rare commodities. And then I stopped to help you, I said slowly. And then you stopped to help me, she confirmed. You were exhausted. You were late. You were worried about your daughter, but you stopped anyway, and you helped with such genuine kindness that it restored my faith in humanity. You reminded me why I built this company, why I keep doing these tests, why it matters to find people like you and give them opportunities to thrive. I was just doing what my grandmother taught me, I said. Exactly, Margaret Chen said. And that's why I want to start a program in your grandmother's honor, the Grace Mitchell Fellowship. We'll identify people like you, people who are working multiple jobs, struggling to survive, but who demonstrate exceptional character and compassion. We'll give them opportunities, education, support, and a path to success, and I want you to run it. I felt my breath catch. You want me to run a fellowship program? I want you to do what Eleanor Grant did for me, and what I did for you, she said. I want you to find people who are invisible to the rest of the world and show them that they're seen, that they're valued, that they deserve a chance to succeed. Can you do that? I thought about all the people like me, working themselves into the ground, trying to provide for their families, feeling invisible and overlooked and exhausted. I thought about my grandmother, who had worked as a cleaning woman her entire life but had been the wisest, kindest person I'd ever known. I thought about how one act of kindness in a parking garage had changed my entire life, and how I could pay that forward, could change other people's lives the same way. Yes, I said, I can do that. I will do that. Margaret Chen smiled, and she reached across her desk to squeeze my hand. I knew you would. Eleanor would have loved you, Sarah, and your grandmother would be so proud of the woman you've become. I hope so, I said. I try every day to live up to what she taught me. You do more than try, Margaret Chen said. You succeed, and now you're going to help others succeed too. The Grace Mitchell Fellowship launched 6 months later, and in its first year, we helped 15 people like me. Single parents, people working multiple jobs, people with talent and character but no opportunities. We paid for their education, gave them jobs at Chen Technologies, provided childcare support and flexible scheduling, and created a community of people who understood what it meant to struggle and to be seen. One of our first fellows was a woman named Maria, a single mother of 3 who had been working as a janitor at a hospital while studying nursing at night. We paid for her to finish her degree, hired her as our company nurse, and helped her move into a better apartment. On the day she graduated, she came to my office with tears streaming down her face. You changed my life, she said. My children will have opportunities I never dreamed of, all because someone saw me, really saw me, and decided I was worth investing in. That's what this program is about, I said, hugging her. Seeing people, valuing them, giving them the chances they deserve. How did you know? She asked. How did you know to create something like this? Because someone did it for me, I said. And because I learned from my grandmother that the measure of a person isn't what they have or what they've achieved, but how they treat others when no one's watching. 2 years after that day in the parking garage, Emma and I moved into a house. A real house, with 3 bedrooms and a backyard and a swing set I installed myself. Emma had her own room, decorated in purple and filled with books and toys and all the things I'd never been able to give her before. I had my own room, and the third bedroom became my office, where I worked on the fellowship program and reviewed applications from people who reminded me of myself. On the anniversary of the day I'd helped Margaret Chen, she invited Emma and me to dinner at her home, a beautiful estate outside the city. Her son was there, a kind man in his 40s who ran the company's international operations, and we spent the evening sharing stories and laughter. After dinner, Margaret took me aside to show me something. "I want you to see this," she said, leading me to a room that was clearly her private study. On the wall was a photo of a woman in her 60s, smiling at the camera, wearing a cleaning woman's uniform. "This is my mother. She died before I could make her proud, before I could show her what I'd built from the foundation she gave me. But I think about her every day, and I try to honor her memory in everything I do." "She would be so proud of you," I said, looking at the photo. "You've built something remarkable, and you've used it to help so many people." "We've helped people," Margaret corrected. "You and I, together. The Grace Mitchell Fellowship has already changed dozens of lives, and it's going to change hundreds more. That's your grandmother's legacy, Sarah. And yours." I thought about my grandmother, about how she'd worked so hard and sacrificed so much to give me opportunities, about how she'd taught me that character mattered more than credentials, that kindness was never wasted, that helping others was the most important thing you could do with your life. And I thought about how I was passing those lessons on to Emma, who was growing up in a different world than I had, but who I hoped would carry those same values forward. "Thank you," I said to Margaret, "for seeing me, for giving me a chance, for changing my life and Emma's life. I will never forget what you did for us. And I will never forget what you did for me," she said. "You reminded me why any of this matters. You restored my faith in humanity. That's a gift beyond measure." As Emma and I drove home that night, she fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from playing with Margaret's grandchildren. I looked at her in the rearview mirror, this beautiful child who had been my reason for everything, and I thought about how far we'd come. From a studio apartment and 3 jobs and constant exhaustion to a house and a career and the ability to be present in her life. All because I'd stopped to help someone in a parking garage. What an incredible journey I'd taken from being an exhausted single mom working 3 jobs to becoming a vice president running a fellowship program that changes lives. My story reminds us that true character is revealed in the small moments when we think no one important is watching, and that one act of genuine kindness can create ripples that change everything. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have stopped to help, knowing what it might cost you in terms of time and convenience? Have you ever made a choice between doing what's expected and doing what's right? Share your story in the comments below. Do you know someone like my grandmother Grace, someone who taught you that character matters more than credentials? Tell us about them. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that kindness is never wasted, that compassion matters more than convenience, and that who we are when no one's watching is who we really are, please show your support by hitting that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss our inspiring stories about real people whose courage and compassion changed their lives. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.